opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium. Fellas, we are on air. All right, I don't know if we're having some technical issues, but we're not hearing from anyone. Please check your local equipment's mute button, but we should hear you on the board.
Hello. Can I be heard? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, sounds like I got like a feedback.
Yeah, that's coming off of my line. It'll go away, but I'm usually muted anyway. Paradox, are you having some problems, sir? We heard you before we came on air, but we can't hear you now, sir. Let me try muting you on my end and then unmuting you again. Yes, we're not able to hear you, Paradox. DC, you want to get us started until...
Yeah, I can go ahead and get us started. And yeah, welcome to the program. This is the Code Breakers coming to you once again. Today is January 23rd, 2017. And
24.
today's... Oh, hello? Can you on now? Hello? Okay. So today is January 23rd, 2017.
He was saying it's the 24th, but he dropped off the board, so he'll call back in.
Thank you. 24th. Keep me in line. I don't know why I'm thinking about yesterday, but yeah, today is the 24th, 2017. So hopefully everyone is having a wonderful and productive Tuesday. Hope everything is going well during the now what we call the Trump era. And today we wanted to bring you a program, and basically the program is going to basically be about women. Let me just get the title here. White women, the women's movement, and the impacts on Black family. We also would like to discuss Trump takes office of presidency, and truth, honesty among Blacks, and also media confusion. So it's pretty loaded. Mr. Reed, I think we got some clips that we did send you. If you want, we could just start off with, hello? Yep, I can hear you. Yes, sir. I can hear you. Welcome to the program, T.
Yeah, not sure what happened there. I was speaking, but
Yeah. So, you know, it was kind of jumping around, so we'll get it together. We'll go ahead and flow
I'm
on
here.
through. So okay, good. Apologize for the technical difficulties. On my end, I think it was a user error, so I do apologize for that. But yeah, so we're all here. We're ready to go. And like I said, we are the code breakers. I have T on the line. I have Paradox on the line. So we're going to come through and kind of give you a good program. And we are taking calls. This is a program where we need a lot of feedback. Preferably, we would like to speak with Black women to hear their thoughts about the I guess it would be called the Women's March. I know it was an actual title to the march. Do any of you guys know what the actual title of the march is? I don't want to give it
Nope.
none of its
Don't know
due.
Don't know the title.
Women's March on Washington, D.C.
Okay, Women's March on Washington, D.C. I wanted to put Trump in there. I know Trump's name came up as part of the reasoning why a lot of the women were marching, but a lot of the discussions that we want to discuss today was based on that, and we have some clips from the march, and I'd like to give a little bit more context to what we would like to discuss. So, Mr. Reed, just a quick question for you. Do you have the clip for Angela Davis?
Yes, I have.
That
I have
part?
all the clips just for future reference. Always send the clips in the initial email because I may miss future. Because I was like on my break at the time y'all sent
Yeah,
it. So
that's
yeah, but I can. Do
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
all want me to play them all in succession as per the email?
I would well, I would like to kind of like play them separately to kind of get into a discussion of each one, because I think each one deserves a true discussion. But what do you think, guys? You want to play them all in succession?
No, you can do it. You can do it one at a time. That's fine.
Okay, so let's go ahead and cue it off to the revolutionary freedom fighter, feminista, Black Power activist, Miss Angela Davis. So Miss Angela Davis, we'll go ahead and get her queued up and get her started, and then we'll discuss on the other side. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Reed.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Janae Ingram, head of logistics for the Women's March on Washington. Thank you for coming. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming to the stage the incomparable Angela Davis.
So, at this very challenging moment in our history, let us remind ourselves that we, the hundreds of thousands, the millions of women, trans people, men, and youth who are here at the Women's March, we represent the powerful forces of change that are determined to prevent the dying cultures of racism, heteropatriarchy from rising again. We recognize that we are collective agents of history, and that history cannot be deleted like web pages. We know that we gather this afternoon on indigenous land, and we follow the lead of the first peoples who, despite massive genocidal violence, have never relinquished the struggle for land, water, culture, their people. We especially salute today the Standing Rock Sioux. The freedom struggles of Black people that have shaped the very nature of this country's history cannot be deleted with the sweep of a hand. We cannot be made to forget that Black lives do matter. This is a country anchored in slavery and settler colonialism, which means, for better or worse, the very history of the United States is a history of immigration and enslavement. Spreading xenophobia, hurling accusations of murder and rape, and building walls will not erase history. No human being is illegal. The struggle to save the planet, to stop climate change, to guarantee the accessibility of water from the lands of the Standing Rock Sioux to Flint, Michigan, to the West Bank and Gaza, the struggle to save our flora and fauna, to save the air, this is ground zero of the struggle for social justice. This is a women's march, and this women's march represents the promise of feminism as against the pernicious powers of state violence. An inclusive and intersectional feminism. An inclusive and intersectional feminism that calls upon all of us to join the resistance to racism, to Islamophobia, to anti-Semitism, to misogyny, to capitalist exploitation. Yes, we salute the fight for 15. We dedicate ourselves to collective resistance. Resistance to the billionaire mortgage profiteers and gentrifiers. Resistance to the healthcare privateers. Resistance to the attacks on Muslims, on immigrants. Resistance to the attacks on disabled people. Resistance to state violence perpetrated by the police and through the prison industrial complex. Resistance to institutional and intimate gender violence, especially against trans women of color. I'm almost done. Women's rights are human rights all over the planet, and that is why we say freedom and justice for Palestine. We celebrate the impending release of Chelsea Manning and Oscar Lopez Rivera, but we also say free Leonard Peltier, free Mumia Abu Jamal, free Assata Shakur. Over the next months and years, we will be called upon to intensify our demands for social justice, to become more militant in our defense of vulnerable populations. Those who still defend the supremacy of white male heteropatriarchy had better watch out. The next 1,459 days of the Trump administration will be 1,459 days of resistance. Resistance on the ground, resistance in the classrooms, resistance on the job, resistance in our art and in our music. This is just the beginning. And in the words of the inimitable Ella Baker, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Thank you.
All right, we are back. Go ahead, DC.
Greetings. So we are back. So that was the honorable, great activist. A lot of people know her for her revolutionary work during the 60s. Angela Davis. And basically, I would basically say that she's probably the foremost reasoning why there's so much critical thought, especially, you know, before intersectionality even became a word that was used that was phrased by Kimberly Crenshaw. So let me make sure that I give it its direct due. But of course, what Angela Davis did during the 60s and the things that she spoke about when it came down to the vulnerability of Black women within the system of racism, white supremacy, and giving it a voice. Of course, she was talking about the tenets of intersectionality. It just wasn't called that as of yet. I guess what I would like to start off with is just some of the thoughts that I had with Auntie Davis, Miss Angela Davis. And I say this with love and not anything disparaging against her, because we are not going to, even when there is a disagreement with any of our elders, there will be no name calling, not from me. Anybody that does it, they can do what they do. They say what they say. But for me, I have nothing but reverence and respect, just even for the sacrifices that this woman has made. And I know a lot of people feel a lot of conflicting views when it comes down to Miss Angela Davis. But there were some things that I wanted to kind of start off with, and I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. And guys, keep me on track here. Did she say white supremacy at all?
I didn't hear it.
T, did you hear white supremacy at the very beginning? Or did she say white patriarchy?
I do know it was mentioned during the speech at some point. But
okay, so
white male patriarchy.
Yeah. So my reasoning for this, and I think that the most simplest thing that we end up doing is try to use these academic words, and she used a lot of them where, you know,
A lot of words.
Yeah, a lot of different words, a lot of different points that I know she wanted to kind of touch on and not leave anyone out, when you know brought up the indigenous people.
DC.
That was yes sir, go ahead.
Before you get started, let's make sure we get all of our intro information in, if you don't mind, real quick.
Sure.
I'll let you
go ahead.
Well, you can call
because we do want people to call in. Go ahead, sir.
Definitely. So I believe you can call our toll-free number at 1-866-510-9025. And I think that's is it star to be able to speak, if I'm not mistaken. We are on blacktalkradionetwork.com. You can download our podcast. You can also reach us at codebreakers191 on Twitter. You can email us at codebreakers1999@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram. I believe it is at codebreakers_1865, I believe. And the title of the program, it's kind of a long title, but it's White Women, the Women's Movement, the impact on Black families. Also, we might touch on Trump taking the office of the presidency, the truth and honesty amongst Blacks, and media confusion. And for our description, we do have a few questions, and DC is gonna mix it up a little bit. But some of the questions I want to just for people to think about, we may not necessarily touch on them, but just questions just to get on record, which is what does the women's movement and March on Saturday represent? How did social media respond? Black women and their response from a Black male perspective, white women and other non-white responses that we've came in contact with over the last few days. Does this cause confusion? Does this movement provide prove that racism isn't that powerful? Does unity for all exist with the understanding and acceptance of the white power dynamic? Is the system more complex than we understand? And so those are just a few of the questions that we do have out there for people to ponder on. And DC, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. So
Hey,
just to piggyback.
DC, right quick.
Yes, sir.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. Angela Davis, she didn't say racism, white supremacy, but she did say those who still defend the supremacy of white male hetero patriarchy.
Yeah, I knew that's what I wanted to kind of focus on, because I think it's very poignant, because I think that it gives her white sisters that are right next to us that breed, marry, cousins, aunties, all these white males that they're speaking about, that all these white males are the only ones upholding the system of racism, which we know is not true. You know, the system don't exist without white women, which white women play a very integral part to the system. So back to what I wanted to discuss, though, and just primarily about some of the words that Mrs. Davis used, and like I said, this is just discussing some of the ideas that we may would like to discuss it a little bit further in detail. So I noticed she used patriarchy, which is like a trick word, which includes white women like they are not a part of the so-called system of white supremacy. See, when you say the system of white supremacy, it includes the white family. See, this is a system, in my opinion, IMO, that is a family phenomenon, a group phenomenon. There is no white supremacy without white women. Don't exist. It's no way. You know, everybody has to be on board for this. And this doesn't have anything to do with whether Hillary got in office or whether Trump got in office. Just follow the logic for a minute. If you think, and we have seen how hard it is to have any kind of movement when the women are not on board with you, hence the black community. So just flip that on its head. Black women and black women and black males do not get along. There is a situation where there is a fracture that has taken place. There is a misunderstanding between our groups. So our gender mirror, which is black women or women that are forced into the classification of being black, that they have a grievance, a natural grievance when it comes to how we communicate and identify with our counterpart. That is not the same that the white woman experienced with her so-called gender mirror, because her gender mirror is basically the group that has dominated all other groups, with their help, by the way, to uphold the system of racism, white supremacy. So some of the things that I wanted to kind of get into, and Paradox has already laid it out. We want to kind of get into a discussion. And like I said, I would prefer to have a female point of view, especially a woman that feels passionate, even, about so-called feminism or women's rights, to kind of get us clear on the reason why there seems to be this conflation when it comes down. And conflation just means this camaraderie of gender when it comes down to white women, when white women are no different, especially in black males' eyes. And when you think about the history of civil rights or slavery or the plantation in this particular country, or globally, for instance, white women have always played a role of being complicit. I mean, the riots, they're not race riots, but the terrorism that we experienced here, that our relatives experienced here on this landmass, were all due to some kind of white woman claiming what? What was she saying? Fellas, help me out. What would be the first thing that a white woman would say?
Right.
Right.
or whistling. Somebody whistled some of these
Okay.
travesties that you're seeing, you know, the reason why they hung black males and some of the black women and children are due to some kind of affront on the women, as using that as a reason to be violent towards other groups of people that they classified as not white. That is complicity. I don't care that you have white women there. We're going to get to them in a minute as far as hearing their voice and what they have to say, because it's very interesting that their whole point of view of what the so-called march is totally different. The language is different. The energy is different. It's not the same thing. You don't want the same things. So just to kind of get into a little bit of what are we looking at here, and we felt like just because it's something that happened here in our area, we are familiar with a lot of women that we do know or people that we are close to that may have went or felt some kind of way about this particular march, and just wanted to kind of open up a discussion and kind of think that they thought it would be constructive for us to kind of deep dive into it. So yeah, I wanted to kind of focus on that word patriarchy, and me personally, there's no patriarchy, whatever that means, without white women. Now, if you think that this is just a system that's just upheld by white men, you're fooling yourself. There's no evidence that is a reality, that white women hold a sacred part within the system. Probably the most important part, because the violence that's initiated is due to the excuse of basically protecting the so-called white woman and her virtue. Fellas, you guys have anything that you want to add to it?
I just wanted to say real quick that we are, this is an off week for us. So this is something that we did decide to do. I don't know if it was last minute, but, you know, I know I don't even want to use the word inspired, but it was fascinating to watch Friday. Was it Friday when he was inaugurated, President Trump? And then I think Saturday they had the march.
Yeah, they was already ready to rock and roll. Yeah, so yeah, Saturday morning they was ready. They was out there.
So we reached out to Mr. Reed, and he allowed us to come on an off week. So we do appreciate that. Our normal schedule is the first and third Tuesdays, first and third Tuesdays, and from 9 to 11. And again, you can definitely call in if you have a comment at 1-866-510-9025 and hit ** to unmute yourself if you have a comment. T, did you want to go ahead and say anything?
Just kind of piggybacking off of what DC was getting into. I thought it was interesting because I was out and about that particular day, but I did get a chance to go in and watch at least it was about a 6-hour broadcast that they had online for most of the key speakers and most of the key events. And I noticed some of the things that I noticed offhand was that, and obviously I wasn't there, so I can't speak to all the occurrences that went on, but based on the broadcast that I saw, they started off playing Kendrick Lamar, Nigga, We Gonna Be Alright. But then they went over to Tupac, That's the Way It Is. And then they started playing Beyonce, what's the Formation, I think it was. And just looking at that against the backdrop of the backdrop said the Gathering for Justice, and then it had, I think, 2 or 3 sponsors on it. I couldn't make out one of them was. That I did see was Planned Parenthood.
It's messy, man. Messy.
We all know that was probably one of the major funders, and I think maybe I don't know George Soros, but we all know. Most people know that Planned Parenthood and the connection to Margaret Sanger, who was an uncodified racist, if there was one.
We were not human. We didn't deserve life.
Is she the woman?
Deserve to be wiped off the planet especially black males.
Did she have the black
Especially
fist up with a
black
black woman though? Is that the same woman?
No, that's
No, that's
Gloria
Gloria
Steinem.
Steinem.
Yeah,
that's
Steinem.
Gloria
Steinem. Yeah.
Yeah, Steiner, who was
Yeah,
with the
and she's
CIA.
the she is the
admittedly said that she was CIA. So
Is she reincarnation or something?
yeah, she's Margaret Saint that basically moved into her direct descendant as far as her way of basically practicing racism and making it a more refined system for white women. So go ahead, T.
yeah, so no, and this is something that should be looked into, but I believe, and even in the DMV area, for people listeners that are familiar with that, that's D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. It's kind of like a tri-state area, even though D.C. is not a state, but kind of like the New York tri-state. But what I noticed is like in Baltimore, in the city of Baltimore, one of the biggest Planned Parenthood buildings is right there, not far from the harbor. And all types of security around it, cameras everywhere, police constantly patrolling. Right there in the hood, if you want to consider it that. So it's not the nicest area, if you want to use that term. It's kind of rough. But to me, it was very interesting and kind of tragic to see that backdrop against, and then have justice on the same, printed out on the same, whatever type of backdrop they were using. And going back to Margaret Sanger, who we know was a staunch eugenicist and called people useless eaters and weeds. People, she even talked about the Negro problem and how they must be eradicated. And she even espoused and agreed to some of the policies and doctrine put forth by the Nazis in Germany. So what's interesting about that too is that people look at Nazi Germany as this standalone type of event, but it actually, a lot of things that went on in Nazi Germany were actually started over here and perfected here. This was actually the starting point for Nazi Germany. People don't make that connection. Nazi Germany just studied what was carried out over here and took it to another extent, another type of refinement. But I noticed that, and I will give credit. I won't say everything was negative. I mean, although a lot of the speeches were inspirational in terms of the wording and how they kind of struck home, I noticed that a lot of it sometimes became kind of a hodgepodge, because you have people talking about climate, climate change. You have people talking about LGBTQIA rights. You have people talking about a slew of different things. I will give a shout out to I don't know the sister's name that gave the speech toward the end. But she was one of the three women that was said to organize the speech. And she did mention the fact that we built this nation and that we, our women, breastfed the slave masters that oppressed us. And she even mentioned a couple of the people that were shot down by police, murdered by police, like Philandro, Mayana, Tamir. And so she was very powerful in that regard. I didn't expect to see that, but I did see some good from it as well. So I'll leave the floor though for you gentlemen.
Do you remember where you you said what was that? What were those images that you saw as far as the sponsors and stuff like that? What was that? What video was that?
It was I think it was an ABC video,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a shot of the stage, and behind the stage, behind the drummer, the band, they have it's like almost like like you go to a stage play and you have like the different the setting backdrops. This is almost like a blue kind of backdrop, and then it had white wording on it, and Planned Parenthood was on there, and then it had the blurb about something to the effect of a gathering for justice. But again, that was a 6-hour production by ABC News. So I'm not sure how much that it did not capture, but 6 hours, I mean, it seemed to catch most of the key speakers of what people would consider to be the keynote speakers.
Okay. I mean, let me say this. I may approach it a little differently, I think, which is, so, you know, Trump goes to the inauguration, and then, cause I'm not even keeping up. So, of course, you know, I wake up Saturday and, you know, this movement is out here. And it was already playing. They've been working on it, I think, for quite a while. I also heard from some of the people that they interviewed that it really wasn't about going against Trump. It was more about just women coming out. So I mean, you can kind of look at that and see it for what it is. Obviously, I didn't talk directly to these people. Just kind of watching it through media, which is, you know, not that trustworthy, obviously. But you know, it moved me. It confused me. You know, I saw that, you know, the television told me that, or showed me that people from, you know, Antarctica, from Alaska, from all over Europe and Asia. I don't know if they showed the continent or if they showed the Americas, but I know that they did show other places. Anyway, supposedly it was millions of people came out ultimately. And I think DC was maybe, they claimed that it was 500,000, maybe more, maybe 700,000 or whatever. And to show solidarity for women's rights. Obviously, the reason why I say it's confusing is because if you don't have a certain, this is the reason why I'm saying it this way, is that if you don't have a certain foundation, and this is just for people who are listening or people who would share this information, if you don't have a historical foundation in the reality that's been developed and created that we have to abide by, believe in, or live through, a lot of this stuff seems very, you actually feel connected to it. So, you know, I'm watching it. I'm seeing people on social media, people that I know that are going down there, and you know, they're singing, they're holding hands, they're, you know, typical marching stuff. And like T was saying, you had a variety of groups that were represented, you know, from people who support the so-called Saving the Planet to Planned Parenthood. And, you know, I was thinking to myself, you know, what am I watching? Like, what is this, an anti-Trump thing? Is this an anti-white male thing? Is this a pro-black thing? Are these white people and non-whites coming out telling me that there's two sides here, that there is a what we would call a white supremacist side, or an anti-non-white side, versus the people who support, you know, people of color, supposedly, that white people and people who are not white really can have a group, and that we're going against the white power structure. You know, because when I'm watching it, I'm watching, you know, celebrities and other people speaking. I'm thinking to myself, man, maybe you know, maybe white supremacy isn't a all encompassing thing. Maybe there are white people and other non-whites, including blacks, quote unquote, that exist in this reality, and that these people, you know, we're at war, basically, right? And I call it the war of words, but we're fighting. You know, we got the establishment, the corporations, and that's kind of one side, and then we have the hippies and the green people and the other people on one side, and that's the side that most blacks are on, and we're a part of this group: the Green Party, the Black Party, the Planned Parenthood, the LGBTQ, etc. So that's one group, and that group is pro-black, is for black people, and we're fighting against the Republicans, we're fighting against the establishment, or we're fighting against the I guess they use words like populist or nativist. They even call themselves natives, which is kind of funny. But anyway, I don't want to ramble too much, but it definitely was confusing in a sense that if you don't have any type of information and you're just going along with what you're seeing, you can definitely get caught up in that energy. Because we're talking about millions of people around the world, and they showed that stuff for about 30 hours, I think, at least. I think from probably early in the morning throughout the entire day. So at least that's 14 or 15 hours. Then they talked about it from maybe late that evening until all the way through Sunday. You got a good heavy dose of them narrating and setting things up to make you try to understand what you're really seeing. So anyway, DC, did you have anything?
Yeah, just before we just continue, and we're talking about the woman that a lot of white women go to discuss, or their shero in a lot of ways is Margaret Sanger, and this is very, very important because everything that happened after Margaret Sanger, and you already alluded to it, you and Tina already alluded to it, that Margaret Sanger is the almost like the co-author of the final solution that happened in Germany. And if you want to delve into World War II and the thought pattern about faulty genes and people being basically not worth living, please look up the tenets of eugenics. She wrote plenty of articles. She was not a friend of black people. And see, this is the thing where things kind of merge, sort of like what you're saying, the confusion of it, because if you don't have a context about where things are derived or what was basically supposed to happen to you as a group of people. Remember, this woman is from the early 1900s. She lived into the early 60s. Margaret Sanger. She lived basically for a long time. But I'd like to kind of give you an illustration of how duplicitous this woman was, and also give you, out of her own words, her basically describing the so-called, just like Paradox just said, the Negro problem. This is in a letter that she wrote to Clarence Gable in 1939, and this is words that she wrote that they have documented. They do not hide this. We don't want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who could straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Margaret Sanger, commenting on the Negro Project in a letter to Gamble, December 10th, 1939. See, our idea of not having a clear view of what has transpired in this country and the reason why things are so fractured when it comes down to looking at this thing that we call racism, white supremacy. Let me just say this. I don't think that in good conscience, black women, and I know that black women know about, the racist that is Margaret Sanger. I don't think that that's anybody that do any kind of study, and even when it comes down to feminism, it's no way that you're not going to know that this woman was a devout racist, and a protector of racism, white supremacy, believed in it wholeheartedly. I guess my thing is, what happens to the movement when black males and black women come together to try to discuss our issues, when the gender part of it is pushed so prevalently to the forefront that it doesn't become also a we thing, a black cohesive thing. And that's even tender now. That's a tender camaraderie. But even if we're in agreement with some of the black women that we are discussing racism with, there still is this antagonizing agreement between us that we have to bend to a certain agreement where clearly there's no room for black males in this equation. There's no room for us, because at the end of the day, we're going to be looked at as part of the patriarchy, which we don't control. We don't have any hold of outside of being violent towards women, but we're not protected under the law when it comes down to that. It's not like we're going to go to the court system and they're going to let us off because we're actually a male instead of being a black male. Being a black male and in this system is almost like a double whammy. And I don't mean this to basically get into the oppression Olympics. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this as someone that has a black mother, that has female cousins, black female friends, black female nieces, that this is a family dynamic. So what affects me is going to affect them at the end of the day, because of how racism, white supremacy is basically structured, which makes it very, very hard for us to come together and bring any kind of coalition when we are discussing, the tenets of whether we should be listening about Planned Parenthood when there was a racist that created this. And the reason why she created it was because it's clear, she stated, and this included some white populations, of course. You can go down to the Jewish populations and other Armenian, Turkish groups, whatever you want to go, the gypsies or whatever you want to call it. Groups, that people that they felt like because they did not have money to live in said system, that they're going to basically pull from the richest in the system, which means that if you keep having babies and babies and babies and you can't take care of them, then they're going to bring down our society because of the actual pull from the group that has the most, which means that they already had an idea of superiority, of limiting resources to just certain groups of people.
Wasn't the point of the march, though, to say that doesn't exist anymore, that those things are in the past, and that we have a new coalition, we have a new environment, a new structure, a new setup to go against white supremacy, to destroy the system of white supremacy, and to replace it with something else.
Well, here's the thing, and I'll let you
something
guys,
that's more free, that's more open.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I'll let you guys jump in, and hopefully we can have people that's willing to call in, that's willing to talk. But here's the thing about that. That's the issue. So when you have situation where women believe that their rights are being infringed on, and you could talk to most males or us. I could just speak for us that's on this program. We believe in equal pay. We believe in no women being mistreated. We believe that women should be protected. We believe that women play a very integral part to just family life and to the system of working all things. Probably the most important part as far as life is concerned, because they bring life here. That cannot be understated. There is a level to that to where males just can't match, period, regardless of whatever we're doing. So that has to be acknowledged. The problem is when we get into these discussions, and just back to what you were saying, they're saying, well, keep your hands out of my vagina, or don't be intrusive on our rights. And that's where it gets convoluted, because a lot of these things, Roe versus Wade, the suffrage movement, where were black males at that particular time? You see? And then if you pattern that against what took place with the black male interactions and the black woman interaction during the civil rights movement, That's where a lot of this came from. And then you switch into the 70s and the 80s during the era of our parents to when we was born, the pimp era, which is basically looked at as being some kind of patriarchy. But that is that's a fallacy. That is not real. That is not real. That is not true. So now you got this undergird of a male that has been propagated on TV and entertainment of being someone that has a whole harem of women, which he's mistreating, no doubt about it. He's having, free access to them. He's mistreating, he's abusing, he's doing all kinds of things, having children, and it basically causing this kind of fracture for women, to black women in particular, to look at us in a certain way. Okay, so this male that's coming out as being basically so-called alpha male, we talk about that in black male circles a lot. We like to call dibs on who's the alpha male, who's the beta, or whatever that actually means, especially in the system of racism, white supremacy. I would just tell anybody, if you're so much of an alpha, if you're so much of somebody that's a dominant person, get to moving. And I think most people would know what I mean on that. I mean, it's just the stuff that we talk about as far as like this false bravado. It's a shield of vulnerability.
But isn't it as well as its positioning? So we're not the dominant society. We're not the dominant group. So we established that a long time ago. So within our power dynamic, we do mistreat women. Period. And so, I mean, how do you deal with that when, instead of us worshiping the woman, especially the black woman, especially worshiping her as God, as the creator, we won't go down that road today, but how do you deal with showing her a particular level of respect, regardless of the system that we're in, regardless of these movements? I grew up, I can't speak for you fellas, but, I grew up in an environment where you had very, very strong women who, who within the system, did pretty good things. But anyway, I just wonder, how do you deal with the day-to-day interaction versus movements? Because, the vast majority of men and women, specifically black men and women, are trying to set up, for the most part, some kind of balanced relationship, right? Where, you split things, you do this, I do that. And then you can start to break into where you have very abusive environments. You have drugs, et cetera, incest, rape, et cetera, molestation, on and on. But, I would say overwhelmingly, people are trying to figure things out. And I think that gets kind of, I don't know, does that get mixed in with the movement stuff? Or, I always try to figure out, how does the everyday person in this particular environment function simultaneously while you have 10% or less of the people trying to push particular agendas? And then how does that trickle back, to those people, to where, you're now, you can go talk to a white woman years ago versus a white woman now. You're going to get two different views on treatment. Now the next question, you talk to a black woman now versus back then, how different is the treatment? And how does economic success, money, position, and also proximity, if you're very close to white males, how does that impact the psyche of as far as the black male versus the black female, et cetera? I know I'm saying a lot of different things, but it just feels like it's a very, very big question, I think, when we're looking at all the different dynamics that play out under this system. I know go ahead, T. Sorry.
Well, the thing of it is too is that one of the obvious issues too was on abortion and the Trump reinstating the so-called Mexico City policy, which is an interesting name, which they've been quoting as the gag rule or gag order, something like that now. But to your point, Paradox, anytime woman has to make the decision to abort her child. Obviously, being a male, us being men, we don't have the ability to carry life inside of us, so we can't fully understand that. But what I do understand in terms of the larger picture is or try to understand, is what kind of a system is in place that would even put that in someone's mind. In other words, what type of things in a larger overarching view, what kind of things are going on in that person's life that are being caused by the system to place them in that predicament. And you can go, say, for example, economics. Person might say, the woman might say, well, I can't afford a child. I'm already working 2 jobs and going to school. I can't hardly even find a job that pays just for me. You talk about the abuse that they suffer at the hands of whatever man, whatever color man, because the system obviously is a patriarchal system. So a lot of it is misogynistic, obviously, and so I think in the black community, so-called, we want to experience hyper masculinity, because as DC alluded to, it's a defensive mechanism, and it's something that people put on, or black men so-called put on, in order to try to show that they're not a boy within the system, because they're powerless. Those same black men, we're coming up on the break, but those same black men that would, do all the rah-rah stuff in the street, as soon as they get in front of a judge, a white judge, in the courtroom, it's a completely different story. And so I think that's a prime example. But what kind of system is in place? I think that's the question we should ask, or listeners should ask themselves. I think it's racism, white supremacy that's in place that's causing these types of results. And how can that be resolved? How can the people that need the most help get the most help, and not have to resort to those sorts of devastating actions? Because I know women in my family, friends as well, that have undergone, and we talk about some women who've gone, 2, 3, 4, 5 abortions. What does that do to a person psychologically? And especially if you're trying to create a relationship with that person, and that woman shares that with you, how can you relate as a so-called black man? How can you try to bring some sense of healing, some sense of understanding to that situation? It's very difficult. And so I think that the other part of it is that we can't be, we don't want the listenership to think that we are trying to say that women should not have abortions, or should have abortions. We just want to examine the system as a whole and understand the drivers behind a lot of things that go on, and the day-to-day interactions that Paradox mentioned, and how that corresponds with the movement, or does it even correspond at all?
Yeah. Well, we're getting ready to go to break. This is the Code Breakers on Black Talk Radio Network.
Black Talk Radio Network is made possible in part with help from the Black Talk Media Project, a North Carolina-based nonprofit engaged in the production and distribution of independent digital black media. Find out more by going to blacktalkradionetwork.com or blacktalkmediaproject.org and look for the menu tab, Crowdfunding Black Media. Black Talk Media Project, helping to provide you with new black media for the new millennium.
All right, we are back. This is Paradox. T, we definitely appreciate your comments before the break. Mr. Reed, I know you said you want to pose a question. Can you go ahead and
Yes.
and pose it, please?
Yes, actually a couple of questions. T just brought up something about misogyny. Where was this outrage about misogyny when it's being directed towards black females on white-owned radio stations targeting black communities? Where is that focus on that misogyny that is actually celebrated and people get awards for singing songs about or rapping about all this misogyny celebrated by corporations? So that's my question. Will all of this focus on misogyny be directed towards those radio stations with that type of programming? The other question was, in terms of Miss Davis's speech, was she practicing codified counter-racism, considering her audience that she was speaking to? Did she tailor her message? Didn't use the word white supremacy, but focus their attention on the white male or the white male supremacist practicing white supremacy, because she is, again, being codified. Because I think about what Mr. Fuller said, when you talking to white people in public forums like that, a lot of times you don't want to bring up the R word, or you don't want, I guess we can say WS, you want to speak about it indirectly. And was she also, the last question I just remember. Will all these women, since they mentioned that they were standing on the land of the Sioux, since Donald Trump has now approved that project, I forget the acronym for the name of that oil pipeline project that is going through the
Dakota pipeline. Yeah.
Yes, he's approved that. Will all these white women and all these other people that turned out, by the millions, we're told, I'm not sure the exact numbers, will they return to those lands and help those indigenous people block that pipeline, since it does impact water that a lot of people drink from, millions of people in several different states? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Mr. Reed. I appreciate it, and you brought me back to and I guess like right after I say what I say, we can go into the final two clips, and I think it's going to basically give us a rundown of the reason why it's so contradictory as far as like some of the words that were used. But no, I do agree. I think that she knew her audience. This is just my opinion. Hasn't been able to speak with her. Haven't heard her speak about her interaction during the march, but I am sure that it wasn't lost on people that she said that this country at its core is a country that is based off immigration and slave labor and slavery, and of course, people know exactly what that means. And in bringing up the first part of that, the Native American population that was basically exterminated here, 500 nations now that are basically forced to be classified as something else. Their bloodline is, of course, in people that are classified as black and even people that's classified as white alike. Just for that to be something that is prevalent here and that don't get the necessary attention that it needs is very, very problematic. And the fact that you can have all these groups of people that are out here that listen to it and that are confused and clap on it, even though we're sitting on land that was basically acquired through force and blood and bloodshed. It was stolen. It wasn't something that was basically, agreed to give away. Like there was already people already here on this landmass. Whether you believe these people to be what is now the African American or the Native American populations, just regardless of that, the fact is that there were people already here that had governments, that had a way of living, that had their own languages, that had their own religions, that had their way of life, and it was taken from them. Period. That's a fact.
Why don't they? Why don't they use the word occupier or invader instead of immigrants? It's interesting that when you hear her speak, even in her speech, and just in general, that for me it makes me feel like a wave of acceptance. Like what you just said sounds good, but the truth of the matter is that we are where we are. We're here. It is what it is. It happened, and we can mention it and we can make people feel a certain way. But if you have an audience full of white women, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And you make that statement, I mean, what should you shouldn't even say that, right? You should just say, y'all should leave. I mean, I'm just making a point. Like, it's just interesting that you hear it in a sense that those events took place. You can recognize it. It's messed up. It's foul, but we are here now. So we can't necessarily live in that space. Do you think that language gets people thinking in that sense that it's not like you can do anything about it, right?
Well, I think that that would lead us into the clips, and I think the clips will give us a clear view. One of the clips will be the white women's point of view. Most of the women that are going to be speaking on the clips are going to be basically participants in the march, and the Women's March are white women. And then the second clip that we would like to play is the one for Roland Martin's show that's on TV One, News One, and they are going to give their viewpoint of what the Women March is about, and then we can kind of come across and then kind of tie everything together and kind of give our synopsis on what that is all about. So, Mr. Reed, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and play those last two clips.
What the listeners, what you're not seeing, but in this video is a bunch of white people. That's basically how I can describe it, filling up the streets, holding up signs, taking selfies and pictures. Okay.
Donald Trump, go away! Racist, sexist, anti-gay! All I want to say is that Trump don't care about us.
Everyone I know said they were coming down here. We are excited. And all my friends like all around from the country are coming here, so I wanted to be a part of it.
And I'm here because I was raised by a strong mother and a strong grandmother. My grandma was a nurse. My mom worked most of her life, even though she was married and raised me and my two brothers. And I'm just proud, I'm proud to be an American, but I'm ashamed at the way this country's going.
And my dad took me to my very first marches when I grew up growing up in Washington. Washington. I went to AIDS rights marches. I went to abortion rights marches. That was mostly what we went to, and I felt like I wanted to come back and take my daughter to her first.
My mother waited for the first right to vote, and she never missed voting. Women are really important. I have 2 daughters and 6 granddaughters, and I think it's incredibly important to be pro for them. This is not my idea of a protest, it is a pro march. It's just a coming together and a healing. A rough time, we've had a rough fall,
so it's been great, and this is just amazing. It makes me really happy because I was very sad, and to see all these people know that I'm not by myself and that there are good people out there, so that's what this is about.
Becky, can you say hi? I mean, it's really powerful to see so many people out together, and I mean, people were squished like sardines in the metro trains and making more and more room for each other and taking care of each other as Beckett dropped cars on the train, things like that. It's emotional. It's powerful to see so many people coming together for these issues.
And what do you hope the message is that Mr. Trump or Capitol Hill or the world will get from it?
I do think about that, but I also think about the messages that it sends to young people. Yeah, that this many people are coming together behind these ideas. They are seeing that all of these people stand behind these values. Yeah.
Our rights, you will not oppress us, and we will stand up.
Exceeded my wildest imagination. It's such a beautiful thing to see us all coming together and remembering that we're always stronger together.
That was, of course, Janelle Monáe, who was one of the singers participating in the Women's March on Washington on Saturday. Now, folks, let me contrast this, okay? So check this out. So I'm going to come back with the highlights in a second. You saw the video. Massive numbers there. Katie Tur of NBC posted this on her Twitter feed. This was the parade route on Friday, okay? Y'all watch this. Now, check this out. This is the parade route on Friday. Don't laugh. Empty.
Wowza.
Empty. Let's go a little further. A few people. Let's go a little further. Empty. And empty.
Wow.
And empty. And I mean, there are photos of Vice President Mike Pence and his wife walking, waving to nobody. Waving to nobody. Empty. Now, here's some of the highlights of the Women's March. You cannot say that was empty.
We represent the powerful forces of change.
I am here to stand in solidarity with all of the women fighting for justice, social justice, and change.
Not backing down!
I'm here in solidarity with those women to defend marginalized voices and defend women's rights on this day and really every day forward.
It was so important for me personally as a Black woman to make sure that there was a representation and the awareness of the intersectionality of this march.
A giant has awoken, and we're not having it.
We will not go back. We're letting the Trump administration know very clearly who we are and what we stand for.
Americans have to decide, are we going to take this? Because you get the government you're willing to accept, or are we going to fight against it?
The resistance effort is not only about a particular group, but it's more of an intersectional response, and it's all about voices.
I think this is a very important day for women, and more than just women, it's an important day for all Americans.
Black women have always been the forefront on any cultural shift and movement in the country anyway. So this is not new to us. We've always been marching. We marched in the civil rights movement. So this is just an extension of what our legacy and our history has already trained and taught us to do.
The fight didn't start with Obama and ain't gonna stop with Obama. This is a fight, it's a 400-year fight for freedom, justice, and equality.
People love this country and they're not willing to give up on it, and they want to make sure that their values get represented at every level.
It says to the 3 or 4 senators who are wavering that the price to be paid for ignoring these many people and voting against their interests.
Put your pride aside and stand up for the most marginalized people in this society. Because if you stand for them, you stand for all.
Once people rise, you can't put them back. So you can't get black people rights and Muslim people rights and LGBTQ people rights and disabled people rights and then say nah, right? Because we're gonna come back, we're gonna clap back, and this is a huge clap back.
All right, and of course, Donald Trump had to weigh in on the marches. He tweeted on Sunday, quote, "Peaceful protests are a hallmark of our democracy. Even if I don't always agree, I recognize the rights of a people to express their views." Of course, big contrast from the anger spouted on a Saturday. Janae, we talked about this whole...
All right. That's it's a lot in that. I will say one thing. Definitely a lot of I would always say a lot of media confusion, but also some old pillars that are always at play to kind of keep us on a certain stream. And that's what that's one thing I would always look at DC as well, is that when you really kind of think about it, you get a sense. And this matter of fact, this is what we were talking about, I think, a couple of days ago, is that you get a sense of. You kind of get a sense of where a portion of us, majority, don't know if it would be the majority, but definitely a large segment of us is in a particular mindset. Obviously, we know where all of this comes from as far as conditioning, but we are in a particular mindset. We have to recognize that that's real. As we use the word confusion, but at the end of the day, these people, they do exist, and they're in the millions, and it's just interesting looking at the way. I like the video because you can kind of see what we're thinking, on the scale of what we're thinking. They're using words like social justice, right? Mm-hmm. So not ending the system, not replacing it with justice, but living within the parameters of the system, and then trying to manipulate it the way you can manipulate it. What non-whites don't understand is that white women, I don't know if most of the white women there voted for Trump, and they feeling this is more of within the system situation than obviously the totality of the white empire. But is it, I always think of it as maximum confusion in a sense where you have white women. Well, first let's establish that black women supported Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah, the most
94, 98%, right? Most loyal, right? Supporters. So the ones who decide to participate in voting, most loyal.
And we were second, by the way. We were second, black males.
So black then, males. So is this movement around the world really for white women to say, my bad? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's one scenario. There may be 50 different scenarios, but those are one of the ones that came to my mind because it's just kind of odd when you really kind of think about like, well, what's really going on here? Because the last time I checked, you got white women sending, allowing people to get off as far as jurors all over this country. You got white women, jurors prosecuting, well, not prosecuting, but, saying that black men specifically, need to get life in prison or need to go to prison for whatever. Forever. I mean, like, aren't these the same white women that sit in those? What are those things called in court?
Juries.
The juries, right? These are white women. I mean, like, I don't even know where to start. It's just so many different scenarios where you have white women all in corporations and school systems that are mistreating black men, black boys, and black girls today.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Principles. It's so many different things.
Most elementary school teachers in this country, and even in the hood, are white
liberal.
women.
liberal white women, specifically in the inner cities. But
absolutely.
What was the movie with Michelle Pfeiffer?
Dangerous Minds. We spend most of our lives living in the gangsters.
Coolio.
Paradise.
Gangsters Paradise. Yeah.
Coolio. Right. Yeah.
So I would say this. I do understand. So because again, I know we're kind of moving in and out, right? So on one hand, if you're trying to get benefits by hooking up your chain to white women to get benefits within the system, let's establish that position. And the reason why I'm saying that is I found it interesting that the female, beautiful sister from what's that show called Living Single? The highly melanated female, I can't think of her name right now.
Erica Alexander. Yeah, Erica Alexander.
Maxine. Beautiful woman. She beautiful woman. She was being interviewed, and even though she is a Hillary Clinton surrogate, went all over the country, she still established that as a black woman, how she's treated, how she's underpaid, how white women get more than her. So I thought it was fascinating that she even said that, live on one of the networks. So it's not like many of us who participate don't know what's going on. So then the next question I have is that, okay, so just like looking at myself, am I tying myself to white men to get benefits, not saying certain things, doing things a certain way to participate? Right? Because once you move out of that space and you become anti, that's something else, right? So I just wonder, I don't want to necessarily, people are doing what they have to do to survive. So it's like I said, there's many layers in it. So, how do you help people deal with that? Because it can confuse you when you're like, well, you're saying one thing, you're being mistreated. That white men, white women, and white children as a collective group are trying to maintain their power. At the same time, trying to appease non-whites culturally. I don't understand it though. It's my whole point. It doesn't really make any sense that you have these people going out here marching. You have the feminist movement. And that's all kind of lumped in with a lot of different other movements. I don't know how black men, how do we process what we're looking at when we know that at the end of the day, if my wife, my girl, my lady, my mother, my if they can get benefits from this, how do I deal with that? Because am I going to tell them to be completely anti when I know that they might need these people? Isn't that how this all works out? Where you can't go too extreme, because at the end of the day, we understand that white people are at the top, right? So we need access to them. If you listen to those clips, you're hearing people ask for things.
Absolutely.
When anyone goes back and listens to these clips, they're asking who. Well, then the next question is, well, who are you asking? Right. So you're not asking black men, because someone first had to establish, and you can call in, have to establish that black men have power. And I mean, when I say power, I mean owns something, has something, controls something.
They can protect. Don't forget about that.
And can protect
on a mass level, not even a mass level, on a level where there is punishment given out if rules are broken. There is a system in place that protect this particular group of people, an all-encompassing system, and then an outside group cannot trump that system without warfare.
Well, let me make sure I'm clear, because maybe what I said wasn't totally clear. Trump is our example. So Trump is a gift that will continue to give, unfortunately, and disgusting as it's going to be, no different than the last 40. But what he's going to be a great representation of it, since he will be considered an extreme, more independent. This is when we all need to be studying. I miss Dr. Wells, and I wish he was here, physically speaking, because this is where you're going to really get a good sense of white supremacy, of white dominance, of the reemergence of visually speaking, having that white person in your face all the time, white male, 70 years old, etc. So I think it's going to be, you know, in the language is just, it's unbelievable, right? Where they're just making up new language, new words about truths and what's real and what's not real and which reality are we speaking about. So anyway, he's the best example I think that we have, because you're seeing a person that can pretty much do or say anything. And why? Because he has the support. The way it's structured, the way it's designed, it shows you that if you have the correct support in place, you can kind of say or do anything you want to do. No one has to like it, but they can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And we know who his support is. We know where his support is based. And when we look at those voting maps, if all that stuff is accurate, you look at those voting maps, you look at where his support is coming from, and that's the representation of this place. I mean, what else is there to be said? You know, you have all the, in my opinion, he is the evidence, right? You have, just follow that, just follow that track. And I think it tells a lot, you know, and it's directly in your face. There's no confusion here. And so is the Women's March a response to that, to say, hold up, you're uncodified, you're unrefined. We spent 70, 80 years developing a system where white people are good. They're good people. They're people that are in place to protect the non-whites on the planet, to protect the earth, to bring democracy to the world, you know, and to get rid of whatever ignorant, backward systems that you have in place. We have the answer. We are the way. We will give you what you need. We will give you Christianity. We will give you technology. We will give you a governmental system. We will even help. We will come and do things for you to make your life so much better. If you just do what we ask, you know, abort your children, you know, walk around half naked. Well, let's not go down that road. I won't mess with the cultural stuff. But the thing is that he's a good representation of that. And I'll stop right there. I don't want to go too much on a tangent.
Well, you know, it's interesting to listen to those clips that you played at the beginning, because if you listen to, I believe the last few women were women classified as white, and a couple of them actually were going to break down and cry. And the way they voiced what they were going through was more like an experience, like a sojourn for them. And it went back to, I guess, maybe women's suffrage for them, and maybe Roe versus Wade or something to that effect. But when you listen to, and going back to what I was saying, the sister that I was giving a shout out to, Tamika Mallory, sister classified as black, she started off her speech, I don't think I caught all of what she said, but kind of paraphrase it. She said, "This is not a parade, and this is not a party. Today is an act of resistance." So she was actually setting the tone. I don't know if that was actually in her speech to begin with, but it kind of sounded like
you're talking about.
Might have been,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to give people a little bit more information about Tamika Mallory, right? You're talking about Tamika Mallory. Yeah, she's one of the actual organizers of the Women's March, and I think that she saw the kind of what we call the white woman's gaze take over the particular march, and she did speak, and that was probably one of the best speeches of the whole march, because she got it back on track that this is about, and she brought it home about basically oppressed people. Women, of course, are in that, and I don't mean to interrupt, but just, I did remember seeing that, and I think it's very important. So thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, Tamika Mallory, along with the other co-organizers. I forget the other the Spanish woman,
and Carmen Perez.
So they are basically the non-white women of color. I hate saying that, but just to give you an illustration, these women are not white that organized the march and basically was ahead of the game as far as like getting people back on track. And go ahead and finish up your thought on that, man.
Yeah, no, I was just, that's good. I just felt like it almost sounded like that wasn't part of her speech, and she was just like taken aback by the jubilation of the women classified as white in the crowd, and here it is that, women classified as black. They have a completely different experience. And see, this is that whole thing. We did a show on intersectionality. This is exactly why intersectionality can become an issue, because in the broader scheme of things, when white women are involved, they tend to take the lion's share of the limelight, and then everybody else's voice gets drowned out in that.
And they're real nice about it too. They're real nice about it. It ain't like this purposely.
They'll accommodate you.
It's not aggressive. It's like, oh, we're sorry. We didn't mean that. I mean, this ain't about you. Go ahead, man. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. They're drown out the other voices. But just like how we saw, I can guarantee you there were white women in that crowd who voted for Trump. And it's almost like they did something where they said, you know what, we're going to vote 53% of white women voted for Trump. And it's almost like a thing where they say, we're going to vote for Trump because we know we can maintain the power structure. We're worried about illegal immigration, all these Muslims coming into the country. And then on the back end, we're going to try to find a way to roll things back if Trump gets too out of control and starts rolling back some of our rights. It's even amazing to me that people are going to the government for rights anyway. The government, there's no government without people, right? The government, you have buildings, but there's nothing without the people that work inside of them. So it's amazing to me that people are begging, and paradoxically to this, people are going to the government begging and asking for rights.
Well, T Ho right there. We're gonna go to break. We want you to finish up your comments, and we got a couple of callers. I don't know if they're just listening or not, but we're gonna check in with them as well. But we're gonna get ready to go to break. This is the Code Breakers on Black Talk Radio Network.
Podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com.
All right, we are back. This is the Code Breakers. I got DC on the line and T as well. And this is an off week for us. We're normally on the first and third Tuesdays of each month. But Mr. Reed again allowed us to come on a Tuesday on our off week. A lot going on this weekend, so we definitely want to get on the air and just express our views. T, go ahead and finish what you're saying, and then we can check in with the callers.
Yeah, just right quick. This brings to mind too. Because a lot of the women were wearing what were dubbed pussy hats, pink knitted hats. And it kind of brings to mind the what they consider the father of propaganda, Edward Bernays, who brought new life to propaganda and kind of corporatized it, and was kind of responsible for the women's liberation movement and what was made into back then women didn't smoke, or at least it was taboo for them to smoke. So Lucky Strike approached him about how to basically break into a new market. He reached out to Bernays, and he came up with the concept of torches of freedom, which were the cigarettes. And they would light them up and say, these are torches of freedom. And to a lot of people, and I can see how it symbolized women's breaking the taboo and having the ability to be more independent and self-realizing. And to me, and I'll just leave it at this when we get to the callers, is that it seems like a lot of the same pages from the same playbook are being replayed, and the pussy hats to me are like the torches of freedom. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to lead, but it's just something to consider and something to keep an eye out for. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I was also curious about just another question to put out there is that what about the other group, the more conservative white women and the more conservative white men, and just their position within the system, as well as something to think about, who's basically anti, I think, a lot of this stuff, or at least they suppress it. You can definitely call us again at 1-866-510-9025 and press star to unmute yourself. So we got one caller from, I think this is Milwaukee area. Last four digits of the number is 0613. If you had a comment, you can press star to unmute yourself. If you had a comment. All right, so we'll go to the next person. I see another number here. Last four digits is 8043. If you had a comment, just press star. All right, I think they may just be listening as well. And the last one we have on here, I think, is area code in the the last four digits is 7656. Press star if you wanted to make a comment.
Hello.
Greetings.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you so much for having this program. I was just listening. Personally, I thought the Women's March was a dumb idea. And 53% of the white women voted for Donald Trump. If you're going to have a march, you need to get your message together. Your message is not together. Whether you're black, white, whatever you believe, you need to get a message and then come out with that. I don't know what the message was supposed to be. I'm not wearing nothing that says vagina. Well, I was going to say vagina hats, but you know what it says. They did the same thing when he calls her a nasty woman. Oh, we're nasty women. Why would you want to be? I don't know. That just doesn't make sense to me. I've never really, I don't want to say I've never agreed with it. I've always thought like the feminism, whatever, was just a white thing. I usually even think abortions was a white thing because when I was in high school, we had this club, the women's club, and no black people went. They were like, oh, we don't have any black people. So I went for a whole year, and for a whole year, that's what they talked about was abortion. So I just thought they were whores. I'm like, don't you have anything else to talk about? I just didn't get it. So I guess I've never really studied it. I really don't understand it. I know they're not on the side of black people, especially when you have things that come out against black people, like Scotty, Mr. Reed talked about the music. Sometimes you hear things, sometimes you don't, but not really. And then even when, I guess I'm thinking of Mr. Castillo, not him because, he passed away, but his girlfriend. I don't remember coming out to support her. Like, she was there. Why don't you believe her? You never believe women, blah, blah, blah. They never did. I don't remember any of that, so I just don't believe in the support that they have for black people. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. We appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that the whole feminism, it seems to be a twofold, like a thing that is basically connecting two adjacent groups where these two groups are clearly the group of women that are not white. And then even within the group of women that are not white, there are differences between how the treatment is done there, because you got colorism, you got beauty standards, you got hair issues, you got how people are looked at as far as even within light-skinned black people, dark-skinned black people, the modeling industry, fat shaming, sexual issues. So even within those groups of individual women's experiences, it gets convoluted. And like you said, there's no clear agenda. It's just, it seems like white women was at a pep rally, and then the women that were not white were there for another reasoning as far as trying to get things done. And getting the things done included, males, because these are mothers, these are of course sisters, these are of course wives, or they love a person that is of the opposite gender, but they are suffering right along with them within the same system of racism, white supremacy. But then, most of the women that was there were white women. And it was more of a pep rally. And even though they wanted to kind of share their views about the boogeyman, which is Donald Trump, I just think that it was very, very, very useful as, selling some kind of propaganda.
The boogeyman is their fathers and their brothers and their uncles.
Indeed. There should never be, that fact should never be lost upon the groups of people there. And I think that's what Tamika and, the other sisters was trying to relate to the white women. Like, we know who you are at the end of the day. Like, that is not going to be forgotten. But it's just, it became something else. And I think that a lot of times, it happens with all our movements and all our marches. The March on Washington, when Martin Luther King did it in '63, he even acknowledged it later. But Malcolm X spoke about how the march was basically hijacked. Hello, can I be heard? I'm sorry, I think I went out for a minute.
Yeah,
but
how
the march was hijacked by so-called, that word again, white liberals. And, so that has become something that is very, very, confusing when you're dealing with victims of racism, white supremacy, especially when we have so many internal issues, people from poor communities, bougie people from rich communities, suburbs, uneducated, educated. We got so many internal issues that we have to deal with.
And
the dynamics between the genders of our groups.
Who's helping us with those internal issues?
Man, that's a good question.
It ain't white people.
That's a good question, because
you sure about that?
I was about to say that it is, they're involved, and it's like, when they go, sister, I'm with you, and it's like, see, we don't have movements like that where socially white men and black men get together. Well, no, let me take that back. We do have movements like that, but it's in the form of a football field or a basketball court. But we are still clearly in a minority, and most of us that are in jubilation with the so-called white male or sharing some kind of society space, they're cheering a black person on. Whether it's LeBron James or a football player that they love, you know what I mean?
I will say
that's part of that same kind of confusion that goes there too, but it doesn't seem to have the same kind of effect.
I will say I don't know how to put this into words, but it is impressive that black people, being such a supposedly a small portion of the population here, is how much attention that we get and how much the appearance of power that we have. So black males are 5 or 6% of the population, black women maybe 6 or 7% of the population, based off of their numbers that they put out. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you can have 7% of the population have that much say so in a march of that scale globally. I wonder, does that cause confusion, or does that say that maybe, like I said earlier, maybe things aren't what we're saying that they are? Because it's 7% of the population, and someone can check me on this who has the time. On this planet, in any history, during any time, was there a group of people at that percent relative to the major dominant group that has this much interaction at this level? I do find that something that's interesting is that we have some level of power, or at least a perception of power, because in what world does 7% of the population have this much appearance of say so? And especially when we even go down even lower, when we're talking about the groups, when you split us out and say maybe 2 to 3% of us might be considered extreme liberals versus the rest of the group. I wonder what does that say as far as just what we offer, just our level of power as an individual or even as a group to get that amount of attention. I just think that's I don't know if there's a dichotomy there, confusion, some sort of, it seems one way, but maybe it's really not that way. But how can it be? You're 7% of a population of hundreds of millions of people, and you're put on stage globally. Does that cause some level of confusion? Is a question something I was thinking about as well over the last 48 hours or so.
Can I harp on that? Because throwing out the numbers, something that confused me terribly was the fact that when they started juxtaposing the photos, the aerial photos showing I guess you want to say the lack of people gathering for Trump's inauguration versus the protest, the women's march on D.C. the following day, is really confusing to me because apparently there was enough of the populace to get Trump into office, yet they weren't present. And the funny thing, but the following day, you saw millions of people, worldwide, coming out. Obviously, millions of people can't vote worldwide. But even just here in the United States, you had hundreds of people, shutting down avenues, broadways across the U.S. And so it's very confusing to me because my brain is telling me two different things. I don't know what to think. I'm looking at the inauguration versus the Women's March. And then when I go online, I'm looking at comments and people are saying, well, the people that voted for Trump have jobs, so they couldn't come to inauguration. It's very confusing to me. Very confusing.
Also, it seemed like people, white people specifically, miss President Obama and Michelle. So now you have groups of whites that appear to be dedicated to those two people, and that as well, I think, seems to be strange because it's telling. Yeah.
Because I don't understand. You already knew they were only going to be there 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you loved them or not, that's the way the system worked. They were going to leave. They're not going to come back. They're going to live their lives. That's what happens to all presidents. All of a sudden, you miss these black people. I don't know why you miss these black people as opposed to other black people. They're lovely people, but I am kind of glad I don't have to see them dance on late night anymore. No offense to them, but they made it seem like they didn't have anything to do. They were always on some talk show, doing this, doing that. I thought being the president was a very busy type of job. They seem like they had I understand having time for people if you go to a town hall or something, but they seem like they have a lot of time on their hands. I could see her because it's not a paid position being the first lady, but he seemed like he had a lot of time on his hands.
Michelle couldn't wait to get up out of there, man. That's facts right there. She was so happy to escape Washington, D.C. It's not even funny. So, I know that they may still have, is it Sasha, I think is the youngest. Mm-hmm. I think she's still here going to school, but after she graduate, they up out of here. They're going back home to Chi-Town. So, yeah, you're right. Parading them around, I think it was used as far as the mental aspect. And back to what you were saying, Paradox, the confusion. I think that back of the so-called, when we talk about the group that runs things in this country, that something has to be appeared to be given. So the showcase aspect of it is very, very, very useful. And as we see with President Obama, we saw his powerlessness. Whether we thought that he could do something or not, we know that the system exists as far as racism, white supremacy. So there was going to always be some kind of form of resistance. And whether he believed that he can affect change or not, there were groups of white people that basically said, not on our watch. So I think that it is very interesting that you did get to see the showcase of how it appears to be, black people in charge or black people getting a foothold into the system and, affecting change. But I just think that that is because of the psychological advantage that basically gives, because we know by the numbers says it all, that most black people are not in a good condition, are not in good situation.
The numbers don't bear it out. The numbers don't bear it out.
Yeah, economically, anything. So no matter what's being showcased, whether it's Oprah, Beyonce, Jay-Z, LeBron James, whoever, Denzel Washington, whoever you want to, choose, or, Steve Harvey and, his million. Well, that's name calling. Anyway, so you have this idea that, okay, there are things being done. There are black people.
Well, the question is,
that are making changes.
Well,
so
I think the question is, do we think do a portion of us want white people to love us and to accept us? And so when you see Michelle and President Obama being hugged by white people that are in tears, that are emotionally connected, that might even give their life for him, what does that do to the mind of black people? Because
doesn't anything for me.
Okay. I think that I know that it's doing something to some of us. I don't know what that is. That's why I posed the question. Is that does it create some belief that will things get better? His whole concept was hope and change. His whole concept was to possibly just convince black people. I mean, I don't know what they put him up there to do, but is his role here to make it appear that whites accept us and that we're all the same?
Yes.
He's going to be, and apparently he's going to be around, for apparently he's going to be around at least for now. So I'm just curious to see how will he continue to be used? How will Michelle and the kids continue to be used to create certain types of, I don't know if you even want to call it, does it create more division? I know Saturday definitely had to create some division because it looked like black women and white women was loving each other. And so, from a media perspective, and you talking about people are, constantly eating on media, especially social media. So I just wonder psychologically, does that put us in a position where it makes us weaker when we're trying to combat white supremacy? T, did y'all have anything else? We got about 5 minutes or so left here.
Interesting that going back to the pussy hats, I saw that the transgender community said that they felt jaded, that they felt left out because they were saying that having the genitalia of a vagina should not be a qualification. So I thought that was interesting too.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
Tissue.
So I mean, I think the way I would kind of like, kind of fit this all into a I guess a congruent of a lot of different thoughts. There's a lot of things that went on this weekend that have basically happened to everyone as far as like their whole understanding about how the system works, what is it doing, how does it affect your so-called gender or whatever standing you take. Of course, people identify themselves in different ways now. But I would just say this. Before any of us here on the line, there was a primary source, a primary thing that was put into place to dominate groups of people that were not classified as white. The original sin, or whatever you want to call it, of this country. And I think this goes back to the reason why they showcase black people so much, even though we're a small, tiny piece of the minority, which makes other poor whites feel like we're receiving some kind of black privilege that is given by whites, by the way. It ain't that we're giving ourselves the privilege. We can't help ourselves with the conditioning. We're just basically receiving the scraps that are given to us by the white supremacists. But the original labor that was basically built this country for free. That means the Capitol, the White House, all of the South, everything that you see primarily outside of, the northern states, and even in the northern states there was slavery, was built by people that was classified or fall into the classification of what we call now black. And that is just an accumulation of mixtures of people indigenous to this land, people that's from Africa, and people that are basically European that raped ancestors or got with someone that they fell in love with back in those particular days. But I'm just saying that because I got to incorporate everything. We got to be real careful because people get sensitive to whatever the lineage is, and I understand that. So that is some of the things that I took from it, that we can't lose track of what got us here. And that basically, just like what Angela Davis said at the beginning, that's all she had to say. This country is tied to immigration, which is the white people that came over from Europe, escaping persecution. And then they came here to practice racism, white supremacy against the slavery inhabitants here that built the country. And now you have an accumulation of groups that get together and expressed ideas, whether they call themselves Democrat or Republican, feminist, or, whatever MGTOW or whatever kind of group you want to affiliate with, is all based on the system of racism, white supremacy, in my view. And I think that without calling it that, it keeps us confused. So, call the system for what it is. It's the system that basically got us here. All ideas derived from it, and it holds up today as being the most powerful system due to how it runs and do its business globally. That's my thoughts on it, gentlemen. So if any of you guys want to go ahead and finish up, and shout out to the callers. I appreciate you sharing your views also.
No doubt. Just want to make a quick statement too. The Latin phrase "e pluribus unum," out of many one, and we see that on the currency. And I believe is that not on the Lincoln Memorial, fellas?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. That's right below Abraham Lincoln. And so if to the regular, I guess, someone who is looking at the protest, you would say this is a perfect example of that. But what I noticed is that when I went back and did the history on it, in 1776, when they were coming up with a seal to adopt for the U.S., the original seal was not the eagle; it was actually a shield, kind of like ancient heraldry, and the shield had six nations on it, and those 6 nations were all European. And so basically it was saying that out of these 6 European nations, these European peoples were going to forge one identity. So people can go back and look into that. But there were six European nations, and that's what we're still living with today.
All right. Well, this is the Code Breaker. This is Paradox.
This is D.
This is T.
And until next time, peace.